Hi, everybody. Welcome to our talk about multi-cloud application deployment. It will be essentially how to use Salt Cloud and how to actually spin machines on every cloud provider and to deploy your applications. Apparently, you are really smart people. I wasn't expected to see so smart people here. So it will not be a very interesting talk if you are familiar with Salt Cloud. How many of you are familiar with Salt Cloud? So about half of you. Otherwise, it will seem fairly easy, but we can discuss it together. We'll see if we find better options to do these things. Who we are? I am Bogdan. I'm the CloudHero CTO. We're trying to build a platform which makes it very, very easy to deploy applications on any cloud. So it's essentially for people that don't have so in-depth experience with using Salt and with using the cloud providers and don't know which is the best cloud provider and all that stuff. And Ruxandra, present yourself.
Vice President for Software Engineering, and I am responsible for the code that we've written that leverages the Salt tools.
Yep. And we also have Andre in the room, which is another colleague of ours. Why do multi-cloud application deployment? Well, everybody has probably different reasons, but we identified a few, which are most common, to optimize costs. Quite frequently, in my case, I encounter that people want to use DigitalOcean or something like that for development environments, and Amazon or Google Cloud for production systems. Another very common reason is to do disaster recovery. I had some paranoid clients that thought that, okay, what are we going to do if we don't like Amazon anymore? What are we going to do if Amazon is going to go down for a few hours? We need to move quickly to another cloud to do disaster recovery. And this will allow you to do things very fast. Of course, it will not deploy a complete new cloud in a few minutes, but it will allow you to actually prepare everything and to have the server stopped, for example, and just spin them up when you have problems with a provider. And for vendor unlocking. It is quite frequently that customers don't really enjoy being vendor locked in. I know that many of you are using Amazon because it's the most popular cloud at the moment. How many are using Amazon? Holy shit. So it's pretty much everybody. But also there are people that have problems with using only a vendor. Would you like to be able to move from Amazon to a different cloud while having the same feature set? Yeah, a few of you? And we think that if you make everything in a configuration management system, then it will be really easy to replicate it everywhere. So as you know, Salt has modules for integrating with RDS and also with Google SQL Engine, for example. So you can use their native services while still maintaining movability. And yeah, if you do it in the configuration management, then it's going to be really easy to move. What's the tool set? The tool set is going to be a cloud provider, of course. Whichever you want. You know that Salt Cloud supports a bunch of them, I think more than 10. And SaltStack, and optionally CloudHero, our product. Our product, as I said before, is not necessarily intended to be a replacement of SaltStack. It's only a niche product that exploits people who want to do things really fast or really, really simple. So we don't want to go inside that area. What are the steps? So first, we define a cloud provider. Then a cloud profile. In the cloud provider, you specify, for example, Amazon with the access keys and all that stuff. With the cloud profile, specify the instances which you want to use, for example, T2 micro or whatever. In the cloud map, are you familiar with the cloud map? Yep. You define what your infrastructure should look like. For example, it should have 10 web servers, 2 database servers, 2 load balancers, so on and so forth. and then you just run the map, and it will spin it up. And of course, it's not just that. There are a few more things which you always have to do. For the cloud provider, you just give it a name. You specify the driver, the access key, and the secret key. Of course, these are not real, so don't try them, because you're wasting your time. And of course, the private key that Salt will use to SSH on the machines and install the minion. So essentially to bootstrap itself. And yeah, for specific vendors, there are specific options. For Amazon, it is the key name as a required option. Alternatively, for example, if you use DigitalOcean, you'll only have a single option, which is the DigitalOcean access token, and the SSH, the path to the SSH key. Yeah, like mentioned earlier. Okay. Now the cloud profile, it's also, we give it a name, and then we specify the provider with the name that we actually used before, the location where we want to spin the machines. There are two options to go about it. You can spin machines in multiple locations, in multiple availability zones, or you can spin them in multiple clouds. Or you can do it some kind of a mix. In my opinion, usually you do it in a single location. So, yeah. The AMI, which should be spinned on that specific cloud, and the size of the instance. For specific AMIs, you can have specific options like the SSH username. For example, Debian has disabled root access. So you need to tell it how the minion should be installed. And of course, the security group. We actually prefer to use an additional security group, which we manually install via Salt, that will have specific options to allow access from the master only. So we're not going to modify the default security group or some other generic one. We're going to make a specific security group which will give access only to the master. Now the cloud map can look a little bit like this. We specify a profile, which is essentially a type of instance and some servers, like we talked about earlier. And yeah, now a few more things. For example, we want to run some commands on the server. For example, if we want to install WordPress, we would like to go in a specific directory and then run that super long command that gets some data from the pillar with the password and the host name for the database. And then we will make sure that it creates the WordPress config file. This would allow us to orchestrate WordPress installation from start to finish without the user making any interaction at all. We also run some salt states, which will have a bunch of dependencies. For example, we'll make sure the web permissions are okay to have the chroot directory owned by the web server user. And then we will get the application from JIT, of course. That's what this state is going to do. This is really important because if you want to run it on multiple clouds, then you'll need a center repository to get all your code from. And then, of course, we will install the web server, the MySQL client, PHP, so on and so forth. Now the high state. The high state will go and specify what's going to happen on the load balancer. We're going to install HA proxy. We're going to make sure that the service is going to run. We have them, as you see, in two different separate states. One installing and another one make sure that the service is going to run. We did this because we prefer to use the formulas from SaltStack formulas. Do you know the repository? With the formulas, of course. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We contribute to those formulas when something is broken, but we're not reinventing to make it much more simpler than that. For example, here we have a specific formula which will make sure that for HA proxy will detect automatically all the web servers, and it will bring them in HA proxy. So you wouldn't have to configure anything in HA proxy. If we detect web servers, we're automatically bringing them in. And for the web server, we have, of course, the PHP, Apache, and so on. Another interesting one is the GlusterFS formula. If we specify multiple nodes with GlusterFS, it will automatically know to create a file system cluster. So you'll essentially have the same files on all your web servers, for example. Now we are getting to the pillar. Of course, the pillar is a very important part because it will contain all the passwords and all the encrypted information. Actually, we prefer not to use grains and mine at all, because whenever you're querying minions via grains, you know that in the minion log file, you will see all the queries that are done with the grains. So essentially, different environments will be able to see what other environments exist in the setup, which is not necessarily very secure from our point of view. We also think that security for obscurity is something that needs to be taken into account. And with the mine functions, of course, it's obvious why it's not necessarily a very good approach with different environments. Yeah. Yes. For example, we are using targeting with the star character. That's one thing, but we are also creating some of these states with our API, which will automatically target individual nodes. So the API has some logic in it, which automatically targets individual nodes. We think it's much, much more secure to do it like that. Yeah, well, it's actually even simpler than that. We're generating all those files through the API, and the logic inside the API automatically knows which nodes are going to be added. So we don't even need to test.ping. We're just spinning them up, and whenever they're ready, and they're doing their thing. So yeah, in the pillar, we save some data. Most of the pillar is automatically generated with the API, for example, the root password and everything. The purpose is to have it completely hands-off, no human intervention at all. But of course, if you don't have the API, you need to do the pillar on your own. Okay? Of course, a bunch of settings. And then in the end, we orchestrate everything together. So we run the map. We set up MySQL by running a specific state. Then we set up the web servers and configure HA proxy. It is very important to do it in this order, because if you configure HA proxy before you have the web servers, then it's not going to work well. And if you configure the web servers before you have MySQL, then, for example, your web application is not going to be able to add data in the database and do all the stuff. Yeah, and as I said, we have a specific approach to do it much, much easier. The API generates everything. We don't write any single line of code while deploying these environments. And while using the API with Postman for a few weeks, we decided, okay, it needs to be a better way. So we created a little command line thing that does everything. It sends commands to the API and does all that stuff. So I will leave Ruxandra to present the API because she's wrote most of it. So I'll give her a hands up.
Hi, guys. So as Bogdan said, Writing those configuration files can be interesting and fun, but for a software engineer, I would like to have an environment and, let's say, launch 10 nodes at a time from just a command line. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So we arrived at the conclusion that we need a simple way to make all these configurations. And the CloudHero API does this. We have, within the API, there are certain steps that need to be taken so that you can have these configurations done. The first step would be to define an organization or a user. Each of these organizations can have multiple applications. And each application, multiple environments like development, production, staging. And within each environment, you can define nodes, which can be different types of nodes. They will not be the same type, like a web node or HA proxy or a database. OK, so the first step would be to register an account. This is the curl command. So you'd need to specify an email, password, and the confirmation for the password, the company name, and the username that you want to use. This will create your account and make some steps from the configuration, like setting up the SSH keys and configuring the cloud provider with the organization data. After creating an organization, you can add providers. We have the possibility of adding different cloud providers from Amazon, DigitalOcean, Linode, and others. Basically, we can support everything that Salt has. By specifying the type of cloud provider and the access and secret keys, or access token for DigitalOcean or other authentication details, and the provider name so that you can easily recognize the provider after. So we have defined our providers. Now we can create applications. And this is just like for defining the name of the application and the application type. But within the application, within the environments, the magic happens. Here you can define the region where you'll set up your nodes. Besides the region, the environment name, and after that, of course, the provider ID, so that we know where to set up the virtual machines. And after that, you can specify a list of nodes. And for each node, a list of packages, the size, depending on the provider you have, you also specify the size, and the node name, also to be easily recognizable. For each of the nodes, we also have an ID that's generated, but it's easier to identify them by the name.
The most important part, Ruxandra, is that exactly that command you're going to run over and over again when you need to add nodes and extract nodes. So the first two things are done only once, and this one, it's done over and over again, so it's nothing more than that.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah, exactly. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You just need to specify another provider ID, and that's it.
About the API, I forgot to tell you that it's a REST API. It's written in Python, so it's very tightly coupled with Salt.
Yeah.
OK, so as you've seen, these are probably a little hard to write. So it would be nice to have just something simpler.
And fast.
And?
And really, really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, for debugging and doing all that stuff.
And yeah, and also writing the commands. So we've written the command line interface. You can also download the package from the PyP repo. It's available there. So what does this command do?
Yeah, let me take over a little bit. Yeah. Initially, we did it because it was tedious to do postman calls over and over again. So we needed a really, really fast way. But we also discovered that quite oftenly, you don't want to set up Salt every time you need to add a new environment for a different client or for a different team with a different master. That can take maybe a day. Yeah, it's going to ruin your day. So we needed a way to be able to do it like that. In 15 minutes before lunch, boom, you have a new environment. So that's why we created the Hero command line. Another reason that we did it, we thought that Joe the plumber doesn't necessarily need to be an expert in SaltStack to be able to roll his own environments on the cloud. And we think that's really easy for everybody, even though they don't have experience in the cloud with SaltStack, to be able to actually do some kind of primitive configuration management stuff. After we install it, pip install Hero, that's it. You have it. You can just run Hero and you'll see all the options that are available. One of the most interesting options, we believe, are the SSH option. You just specify Hero, SSH, and the name of the node, and you'll automatically detect the IP address and go on that server. It will automatically insert your keys on the server and do all that stuff. And another very interesting option is the scale option. Hero node scale up, it will allow you to add 10 more servers of a specific kind. So we think that this cannot be any easier, but we would like to see maybe if you have ideas, we would be happy to implement them.
How would the previous steps look with the command line? First, you need to set up an account. It requires for the same parameters that you need to specify in the REST request. And when you hit Hero register, it will automatically ask them. You don't have to specify anything. Or if you want, you can also specify them by providing some parameters like here, for example, where everything is done in one line. Okay, so register will create. No, it doesn't work anymore.
Okay.
Okay.
No, that was me. I'm going to be your clicker now.
Okay. Okay, so after registering, we can create a provider, also specifying the keys. This will add the provider and return the name of the provider and
Click me. Okay.
The name of the provider and the ID. After creating the provider, we can is the environment.
Yeah, the slides got messed up. Pam, pam, pam.
Okay. We can add an environment, also specifying the provider, the region, and the name. We can do just that, and it will create an empty environment. And in the next step, we can say what nodes we want added. We can add just one node, or we can add a list of 10 nodes, or as many as we'd like. Okay, so this would show the nodes after being installed. All of the commands have something like, have the following commands: list, remove, and create. So we can list the nodes. We can also list the environments. I'm not sure we have.
No, we don't have it.
No. Okay.
So yeah, in a nutshell, we created CloudHero because we wanted to be very, very easy for people, not necessarily for very experienced with complex use cases, but for Joe the plumber, we want to make something usable. We want to make configuration management system without configuration. So, and to fix simpler problems much faster. I mean, I find myself doing the same things over and over again, where I can just run a formula and have it done very oftenly. And I believe that if I can just plug in my formulas in a much simpler system where I can just run some command lines, it would be much, much faster than it is right now. We also have some planned features, and this plugging in formulas is a feature for the future. Essentially, right now we have some integrations, for example, integration with Slack or integration with New Relic or whatever. And you just define your access, your keys for Slack, and it will push messages to Slack. Okay, we fired up some nodes, we fired up a new environment for you. With New Relic, you're going to have New Relic on all your servers, so you can do monitoring. And we also want to create an integration with your own Git repository that you could use to bring in your own formulas if you have more advanced use cases. Other features, maybe if you have ideas, we will be really happy to implement them. So just tell us. And yeah, what else? It's been really fun to create all this automation and orchestration. It came as a need that I identified with Andre. We are both sysadmins, my colleague over there. And we hope it's going to be useful for a lot more people. Along the way, we did a bunch of contributions to Salt because, as you know, not everything was as expected, and when you really need it, you got to do it yourself. So we did a bunch of stuff. For example, I wrote the EC2 instance types myself. If you try to fire up EC2 instances maybe 6 months ago, then most of them were not actually up to date in Salt Cloud. The import key pair feature was done to allow you to import your own SSH key from your server to Amazon, for example, in DigitalOcean. Ruxandra wrote the DigitalOcean integration. And we ironed a lot of bugs. There were a lot of bugs that we lost a lot of days on them. We added some features for networking. For example, it was really complicated in Salt Cloud to be able to launch an instance in the default VPC. You need to specify the VPC ID and all that stuff, which created a lot of complication for users. And a bit of documentation here and there where it was missing. Yeah, and quite a few bug reports that we're still waiting for somebody else to have some time for them because we don't know how to solve them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have questions, we'll be really happy to hear you. Exactly, yes. Exactly, yes. Yes, we're not doing anything really fancy on the cloud side. Salt pulls all the weight for us. So we just specify we want to use DigitalOcean with that ID, and we want to spin some instances in a zone. And Salt Cloud knows how to do all that for us. Exactly, yes. Exactly. No, exactly. We want to make it for people that don't have really complex use cases. If we identify the need that people don't want to have public IP addresses at all, then we'll yeah, we'll set an option or something, but until then, we kind of need public, public IP addresses. No, it's only a salt master, and as it will be necessary to scale, we will add more salt masters. Or maybe we'll Dockerize them, but so far it's working very well. I know salt scales really good, so that's not an issue. Anything else? Are you guys using multiple clouds? Are you thinking of deploying in multiple clouds? No, not really? Okay.
I think just, you say that it's sort of nice to have flexibility.
Uh-huh.
And maybe be more of an optional, I kind of discussion more, but like, make sure we think about being that Amazon is trying to do everything.
Exactly, it's doing everything, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, if you're doing a containers or using their service stuff, they just start to get their proprietary stuff, right?
Lambda. Yes, but it's closing the gate for everybody. Exactly, just as Google App Engine is doing and everybody else. Heroku. Yeah, we believe is not necessarily the best way. We think personally, no, not we. Personally, I think that Amazon is the new Microsoft, if you ask me. And I prefer to have options, honestly. Yeah, it's working. If you do it right now, you're going to have CloudHero. And it's free for everybody until we figure out some features that we can charge money and you would like to pay happily. So until then, it's going to be free. Yeah, for monitoring right now, we're having the integration with New Relic. And we have a roadmap. We have like a bunch of tables written on how we're going to do monitoring. It's basically going to be beacons and stuff like that that are going to collect data and put it in a database. And then we're going to have a dashboard. But it's in the roadmap. It's not done yet. Yeah? Mm-hmm. We don't have that feature yet, but if you make like an issue, we will consider it. I mean, it's not hard to implement. We also have some features like hero top and the name of the node, and it will just run top for SSH on your server, so you can write less and be lazy like that. And yeah, we will consider doing something like that for all the nodes. Yeah, if that's it, guys, thank you for coming. And drop us an email or anything.